Today, we're going to dig into the world of one of the most influential and, let's be honest, controversial authors out there, Robert Greene. His life story is just incredible, a real masterclass in how you can turn deep personal struggle into some seriously profound insights. Greene brings up this quote all the time, and really, it's the key to unlocking his entire philosophy. See, this isn't just about having power over other people. It's about that soul-crushing feeling of being helpless, and that deep human need to feel like you have some say in your own life, your own destiny. You know, to really get what Greene is talking about, you have to understand the man he was before all the fame, before he ever wrote a single word about power. He was an outsider, a constant searcher, and for a really long time, he felt completely and totally powerless. I mean, for years, the guy just drifted. We're talking about 80 different jobs. 80. He said he was just hungry for experiences, you know? He did construction, worked for a detective agency, even taught English over in Spain. But all that searching just left him feeling more and more lost. And by the time he hit 38, that lost feeling, well, it started to turn into real despair. He was getting seriously depressed, even having suicidal thoughts. He had all this ambition burning inside him, but he felt like it had taken him absolutely nowhere. And then, you know how these stories go. A single chance moment changed everything. He's working yet another random job, this time in Italy, and he meets a book packager who asks him a really simple question. Hey, you got any ideas for a book? And in that moment, it was like a dam dispersed. It all came pouring out of him. He pitched this idea that the game of power never changes. The petty politics he was seeing in Hollywood, he realized they were the exact same battles fought in the courts of Machiavelli centuries ago. All his painful experiences finally had a purpose. And that one single idea, that became his entire life's work, to pull back the curtain and decode the unwritten, often brutal rules of how we all interact with each other, the stuff that happens just beneath the surface of our polite, civilized lives. So, what's at the heart of all this? Greene's big idea is that deep down, we haven't really evolved all that much. Sure, our technology is shiny and new, but our brains, they're still wired for an ancient world, driven by these really primal emotions like envy, aggression, and that constant jockeying for status. And from that observation, he basically concluded that society is a giant stage. We're all wearing masks. He says it's not about being fake or dishonest. It's about understanding that you're an actor when you're in public. The real trick is learning to play your role well without ever forgetting who you really are when the mask comes off. So these observations led him to create a kind of playbook for navigating this social game, and he built it all around 3 really essential pillars. First up is power. But look, for Greene, this isn't about controlling other people. True power always begins with self-control. It's about having agency over your own life, the very thing he didn't have when he was bouncing between all those jobs. Because think about it. If you can't control yourself, how can you control anything else? Then he talks about what he calls seduction, which he sees as a much higher form of power. Why? Because you're not using force, you're using influence, and it comes from being genuinely outer-directed. That means shutting off that constant voice in your own head and truly entering someone else's world, whether it's in a business deal or in your social life, to really understand what they want. And he illustrates this so brilliantly by showing you the flip side. Think about the qualities that just repel people. They're almost always rooted in self-absorption, right? Things like being preachy or insecure or just plain cheap. They all signal that you're trapped inside your own little world, totally unable to connect with anyone else. And the ultimate form of power for Greene is mastery. And here's the thing. It's not about passion. Passion comes and goes. Mastery is about the discipline to push through thousands of hours of boredom, of tedious practice, the exact process he went through to write his first book, to get a skill so deep and intuitive that nobody can ever take it away from you. So here's this guy who spent his career writing the rule book on how to gain control over your life, over your circumstances, and then his entire philosophy gets put to the most brutal test you could ever imagine. In the summer of 2018, something totally random, totally out of his control happened, and it would force him to confront the very nature of power itself. He got stung by a wasp, just a simple wasp sting. It caused a blood clot, which traveled up to his brain and triggered a massive stroke. He woke up from a coma, and the entire left side of his body was paralyzed. This is a man who loved physical activity, swimming, hiking, biking, and suddenly he was completely dependent on other people for the most basic things. So there he was, faced with absolute powerlessness. That very state, he warned, was so corrupting. He had no choice but to try and find a different kind of strength, a different kind of power altogether. And that journey back was grueling. About a year after the stroke, when it seemed like his condition might be permanent, a really deep depression set in. But then, slowly, he started to transform that suffering. His physical helplessness gave him this deep, real empathy for others who struggle. His loss taught him to be profoundly grateful for the simplest joys. And his work, writing, that became his salvation. And his whole ordeal made one thing crystal clear. There's a vital difference between two types of power. The external power he'd written so much about, status, influence, physical ability. He realized it's fragile. It can be snatched away in a second. But the internal power he was now forced to build, resilience, gratitude, perspective, that was unbreakable. So when you boil it all down, Greene's entire life story, from his early struggles to his incredible success and then to his devastating stroke, it all points to this one deeper truth. The ultimate form of power isn't about controlling your circumstances. It's about mastering your response to all the things you will never, ever be able to control. You know, Greene teaches that every single one of us has a dark side, a shadow, filled with our aggression, our envy, our selfishness. And he argues that you can't just run from it or pretend it isn't there. So the real question he leaves us with is this: how are you going to acknowledge your own shadow? And how are you going to channel all that immense energy towards something productive and meaningful?